Welcome to Market Buzz. I'm Greg Schnell, the Canadian technician and host of the Market Buzz. Each show, we do a deep dive into different industries using weekly charts to see what is happening on a long timeline. Please follow me on Twitter at Schnell Investor, and you can also find my blogs on gregschnell.com as well as StockCharts.com. So the market's really trying to rally since last Friday. I think on the Friday show, we covered off the China stocks and the coronavirus and talked about how perhaps that the market might rally once they think the governments have control of it, or putting their best efforts into it. It might not already have control, but putting their best efforts forward. And once it's got the government's attention, we might see the stocks rally. Well, I think that's kind of how this week is kicked off. Basically, we haven't got any more good news out of it. But we continue to rally, just knowing that at least they're focused on it. So with that, we've seen the China stocks move aggressively. We've seen some other ones move aggressively. And I think what I want to talk about a little bit today is all that glitter. So Tesla's in the news, and CNBC starts to put a Tesla counter on their screen. That means we're pretty close to the top. And on the other side of that is Jim Cramer's conversation about oil, saying he doesn't think, that industry is the new tobacco. And I couldn't disagree more. But anyway, we'll talk about a few things here on the show today. I want to cover off. It was a great Super Bowl and fun to watch, which was nice and exciting. Tesla has a pretty exciting chart. It's down about $200 today. So that's a little bit different. Indexes, I want to go through the Dow and the S&P and why we're at an important level. And we just need to focus on that while we're here, because we're trying to break through the prior highs. And then gold, the big thing on gold is the miners have started, they've been trending sideways on a performance basis compared to gold. And now all of a sudden they're starting to break down. And typically, that's a good place to avoid the gold stocks. So we want to jump into that in a little bit. That'll be the second half of the show. So first of all, let me get over to the Tesla chart and let's just update this in real time. What we see is, so up here, this was 975. The lines, we got to about 960 or something. I guess we could turn on labels and that would tell us exactly where we're at. But one of the things that we see here, 960, call it 969. And now we're down around 750. And so you see this parabolic advance, and yesterday within the last 10 minutes, it sold off quite harsh. And then today it's continued the downslide. So unfortunately, if you bought anywhere in yesterday, you're down significantly, especially off the high. So the poor last buyer up here is down about $200 right now. So try to be aware of the optimism kind of hinging there, and being down 20% in the morning after you just bought the stock 10 minutes before the close is kind of a big deal. Anyway, we always talk about parabolic surges and how to try to avoid getting caught in them. If you got to sell somewhere along the way to try and make any money. The next chart I want to show is gold. And so it's been all day yesterday going down. I don't really need a minute by minute chart here. But gold's kind of got this big horizontal level that's pretty important for breaching. But if we go to GDX, the gold miners, what we see is the chart's been decaying for longer than gold has. And now it's trying to hold this support level, but we're starting to break this big long uptrend. And if we move to a daily chart, that's a little too busy for me. If we move to a daily chart here, you'll see that this uptrend that we had going off the May lows of last year and now in here is starting to break down. So that's kind of one thing we want to watch for. And it's this breakdown here, and obviously we're right at a horizontal support and resistance level. That makes things a lot more difficult when we have when the gold miners start to break their trend line, and we haven't seen gold do that yet. But what we want to focus on here is, or what I like to focus on, is this gold ratio. And this is gold compared to, or gold miners compared to the price of gold. And you can see that we were building this wedge for the last 6 months, and now all of a sudden we've broken down. But in the big move that we had in May till early August or late July, the gold miners really outperformed gold, and gold moved up dramatically, as did the gold miners. So here, I'm just going to show you this while we're here. So here's the move in May to August, and it was a pretty steep move. And now the problem we have, obviously, is gold has moved up, but the gold miners haven't moved up with it. So we want to keep watching for the price action here. And now this trend, that we've had starting to break down, go below the 10-week moving average. All of those things are things for us to consider. While everything else is performing well, the scooter ranking for GDX is now at 10, which is quite low. And we can see a lot less momentum on this most recent high in the PPO. So we call this negative divergence, where it's making a significantly lower high and price was pretty much making the same sort of high. So while we have that negative divergence, obviously one of the worst ETFs in the market right now, so that just says everything else is going up and gold is no longer. So we want to kind of avoid that. So we're going to cover off those gold stocks and just work our way through. There's still a few names working, but as we get farther along, we'll start to see those dissipate. So getting over to the indexes, the one thing I want to follow here, just quickly, here's the Dow Jones chart. And when we click on that, this is the intraday view, and you can see we're up here trying to test prior highs. When we look at it from the uptrend, we've broken the uptrend. Now we're coming back up and seeing if we can get through. Now, the real question here is how much momentum do we have on this wave? And if we don't have enough, then we roll over and go below zero. That's usually where we get bigger market corrections. So as we test this prior high, and again, that sudden surge off Monday's or Friday's low, that was a 90% down day. So now we're having a big up thrust. And the real question is how many sectors and industries start to participate to help us with that. So what I want to talk about here, we're going to just quickly go into the tools here on StockCharts. Now, we could walk through the industry or the companies in the Dow, or we can just click on this most active and percent up and down. So here under the percent down, what we find is Merck was right up near the top. Disney, it's down on the day, but it's still up on the week. Nike's up near the top corner, Visa's up near the top corner. So all of a sudden, some of these top corner stocks are starting to underperform, and just on today. And then if we go back and look at what's moving up, some of it has been the weakest areas of the market. So when we see ExxonMobil being one of the big movers, Chevron being one of the movers, Travelers, Caterpillar, obviously these charts aren't anywhere near as nice as the charts that were moving higher. So the leaders are starting to stall, and the weak stocks are the ones getting a bounce. And so usually that's a place to watch for caution. And I think, just other than United Health, most of these charts aren't that great for investing right now. So looking at that broad group, I think one of the things to be aware of here as the Dow tries to rally through the prior highs, when we look in on these names, I think, Microsoft has clearly been a monster, just keeps going up. Apple is sitting right up near its all-time highs. Disney up there too. All of these stocks are the most active in the Dow. That doesn't necessarily mean anything because they're always going to trade lots of volume. But I would say the one stock that surprises me is this one, is IBM down here. When we go look at on a weekly chart, this is making a meaningful move here to almost 3-year highs, just short of 3-year highs. So with that push, something's changing at IBM, and I think that might be one of the stocks that we want to watch in the go forward. And I also like the way this is setting up on the PPO momentum. Come down to zero, test it, and start to break out of a 6-month downtrend. That's a pretty nice place to get on board. And this is obviously a big move already this week, $10, but something appears to be changing inside the company since they bought Red Hat. Let me just get out of here. So as the market approaches the prior highs, and we can go over and look at the S&P 500, the big thing here is we're up here, and now all of a sudden we're starting to fall away. And so I as much as I'd like to be fully on board, I think the one thing that did change meaningfully this week on Tesla's probably short covering rally as much as new financial news rally, as it starts to turn up, as that sector starts to turn up, we're going to have a lot of pressure on the electrical grid. I think I was told by one person who works inside city of Vancouver that if Vancouver had all of the cars, or 10% of the cars in the city go to electric vehicles, that it would take down the grid. So there's going to be a lot of need for a lot of power supply. So that's either wind, solar, natural gas, hydro, but there's going to be transmission lines, which is copper and aluminum and steel building the towers. And then a lot of technology around battery storage, so lithium, cobalt, all that kind of stuff. So for my subscribers yesterday, I walked through all of those different types of investments in the market, and we can start to see them starting to lift. But I think more importantly, if we stand back and take a bigger picture view, if that's the direction, then there's going to be a long-term theme there. And that's really probably a more interesting place to look than just kind of checking out this 10-minute chart of the S&P 500. I will say that materials have been beaten down for a couple of years now, basically since the China trade deal was going back and forth on tariffs. And if they start to break out of that downtrend, I think there's an opportunity there for us to start looking in that venue. So what I'm worried about here is that the market has had significant euphoria. We've had the Fed grease the wheels of liquidity again and push this market up high here. And we're now testing the prior high. And usually that's a place to just be aware. One of the things I noticed was that on some of the Dow stocks, the volume was pulling back this week. We weren't getting any sort of real, as much follow through as I might have expected, considering the size of the rallies. So whenever we go back to test a prior high, it's always good to check the momentum and make sure that we've got lots of power here. So it'll be important to see how we finish the day. And if we end up finishing the day near the lows, that's probably telling us that we're still going to be stalled in this sideways trading range for a little bit. Okay, so with that, the big thing I'm seeing out there, again, going back to the gold charts, we'll come into gold when we come back from a commercial here. We're just going to show you a little bit about a new show coming up on stock charts. And when we come back, let's hit the gold charts and we'll work our way through that industry today. Okay, so if you get a chance to check out Arthur's show, I want to cover off the gold stocks. And again, there's almost 200 in this list. We're obviously not going to go through all 200. The point I would make is the way I've sorted them is the best performing stocks first. So this always gives you a bit of a glittery view. But I think the important thing to realize is by about the third or fourth page of these chart lists, so the other 15 charts are not quite as rosy. So when we look through here, what I want to show is that Aura Minerals here breaking out nice, trying to make new all-time highs here. That looks pretty good, but thinly traded, right? This thing does 25,000 a week. I can't buy that. So here's Caledonia Mining. Same sort of thing, a huge final surge makes a new high, and then it wouldn't surprise me that it starts to roll over. Leagold Mining, here you see, again, the same sort of volume profile we want to worry about a bit. We're not getting any real buyers showing up around these fresh new all-time highs. Sibanye Gold, nice uptrend here. The trend in momentum is very close to breaking, and that's about an 18-month trend. So I want to be cautious as this starts to come under threat. And obviously, if it stays above the 10-week moving average, usually that's a pretty good place. It would move all the way down to the 200-day or the 40-week moving average down around 650. So that'd be a 30% haircut. I don't think you want to wait for finding support at the 200. Gold Mining Inc. What we see here is, again, just recently broke out to new all-time highs, but no real volume showing up to buy the breakout. So that's concerning. What you want to see is something like this, right, where you get the real thrust going on as it starts to break out. We're not getting that. So a little more caution here. Here's Equinox Gold, and you can see this one having a rollover bar. It's not that scary, but I think in this case, we did get volume coming into it, and now it's starting to pause. I just want to make sure this trend line in momentum doesn't want to fail. Nova Gold Resources, we're starting to make lower highs on momentum. So this one up here is continuing to make higher highs. This one's already making significantly lower highs. So price is higher, but momentum is lower. And we can clearly see the volume profile waning here. So that is more of a concern for me. And then here's Lundin Gold. This one's pretty much having a reversal week up here at the top. And again, that would mark a lower high in momentum. I'll call it somewhat lower volume on this high, but not nearly as noticeable as on some of those other charts. Last week was still well above average. Teranga Gold, again, big uptrend here, just broke out to new 52-week highs, but hasn't been able to do anything with it. And this uptrend in momentum looks like it's under threat now. Franco-Nevada, the chart's very bullish, nothing wrong with this chart. I think the bigger thing to watch for here is if the rest of the industry pulls back, probably got to be a little bit more cautious. But the price action on this one is pretty solid. The real issue here is, we had 15 million, 10 million shares up in here, and then 5 million, and now we're down in the 1 and 2 million shares over here for the week. So pretty quiet. And again, if we started to make a lower high in momentum, that's just usually a good place to watch. I'm going to jump forward just to show you the difference as the charts change here. So here's a Cisco. This one had broken out to a new high, just briefly spent a couple of days up there and then pulled back down. Now we've been going sideways for 6 weeks. Not really that bullish, and you see the scooter ranking starting to let go as it shows underperformance. Silver Standard Resources, this has been a great stock, really a nice climber for almost 2 full years now. And again, maybe this is just a pullback to the 40-week moving average in a chart like this, that might be okay. I do not want to let this uptrend go here. So, whoops. I just need to hit the annotate button. That makes it easier. So I've got this uptrend in price, and I've got this uptrend in relative strength. And if this starts to break down, that would be a cautionary thing for me. So usually when you finish your relative strength uptrends, that's probably a not bad place to exit. And we're sitting very close. And once again, we start to see the scooter breakdown. So that's, again, for people who might be new to the show, the StockCharts technical ranking is percentage performance like you'll see with sports teams, where you're trying to outperform the other teams in terms of number of wins. And the same thing in the StockCharts technical ranking. It ranks the price action and says, how are you doing compared to your peers? And it was up in the 90% level for 4 or 5 months now. It's all the way down into the 60% level. And the real question is it going to be a brief dip? And I think one of the concerns I have is just how many of these gold stocks look like they're ready to start pausing. Okay, let's go back to the 10 per page mode. And here's the gold silver trust. And what you see here is a test of the prior high, and so far pulling back. And again, that would be on lower momentum. And I don't like the fact that the uptrend in momentum has started to break already before the price has. So that's usually a cautionary flag for me. Kinross Gold, same thing, trying to break through prior highs, and it looks like it's going to stall here with lower momentum. And again, we're only 3 or 4 pages into the whole list of 20 pages of stock. So I'm somewhat worried about how these are starting to underperform. So Goldfields, obviously a big uptrend going back 18 months, pretty nice. Hasn't really done anything since August, so since that other high was hit. And then again, kind of grinding sideways, a brief moment of glory above new highs, and then pulling back for the last 6 weeks. So as gold went higher, regardless of all of the the issues we've seen around coronavirus and all of the scares and gold trying to rally, this stock really hasn't been able to do anything. So a little bit concerning. And again, downtrend in momentum already here, broken uptrend in momentum. So at this point, it's sideways, but I would just say if it starts to break, that's probably a really good sign to leave. Sprott Gold Trust, again, same thing, uptrend here. Got all of these different ones. This is the US version of the same thing. Here's the Canadian ETF, which would be the equivalent of GDX. And there's a few more names in this one, but the same issue here where we're double topping, actually all the way back at a prior high from 2016. So is this a big cup with handle? Yes, as long as it breaks out. Starting to see the scooter ranking underperforming for the first time in 8 or 9 months. So that's probably more cautionary. And what you don't really want to watch for is when all of a sudden this was outperforming and stops outperforming and becomes average at best or worse. And so we're starting to see that, right? It's bounced 3 times, making lower highs in momentum, kind of what we saw back in here. And then when it really starts to break down, it's a good place to be cautious. Agnico Eagle, we're seeing a sideways trend here for 9 months and starting to pause here in terms of scooter ranking down to 50%. Again, even with the big push up of almost $100 in gold, this stock did nothing. We're starting to see momentum definitely wane, and the uptrend in momentum is clearly broken. Moving on to maybe I'll just take a few more minutes here in this area. Barrick Gold working its way sideways to down. Coeur d'Alene mine has now broken the trend. You start to see this wave roll over. And again, I covered these stocks off not too long ago. I think it was only a couple of weeks ago. But the reason I want to come back to it is because they were starting to look weak then, and now they're starting to follow through. And a few, again, a few names have been able to hold up, but you're seeing these scooter rankings on almost all of these stocks starting to dive. And that just tells you that you probably want to be more careful as they start to underperform as a group. So the more I look at it, the less comfortable I am staying in these names. And you start to see this big wobble here. In all cases, when the whole group is starting to shut down like this, it's probably a better place to just step aside. So when we go look, I just want to get down to the bottom here. When we get down to the bottom and just kind of jump out farther, you've got some really weak charts. And again, remember gold was rallying $100 and these stocks couldn't move. So the really weak names are terrible. They're getting hit really, really hard and are continuing to underperform. So as you look through the group, I think there's a pretty good indication. I got an email about this one yesterday. Greg, what do you think of the gold stocks? And I couldn't help but think, they're breaking down as a group when I go through them. But I think one of the values that you find by having a chart list that's all gold stocks and you can just go through them one after the other is the ability to just see what's, a main theme. And here we have silver. This is the actual continuous contract. And uptrend here under threat rate. Now, already broken the uptrend in momentum, or if not, very close to it. So the silver chart has actually rolled over sooner than the gold chart. Yeah, so this hasn't quite broken, but very close to it. When this starts to break, that would be a definite worry sign for me. So I have one chart down here in another chart list. And I'm just going to go get it. And the chart I want to show is gold and silver together on the same page here. And this is just a weekly chart that I go through with my subscribers every week. And what you see here is this chart was making higher highs and recently made a higher high. Look what happened to silver here. It's just paused relative scale and is starting to break down. This 6% and 1% is what percentage this particular commodity is of the CRB index. So you can ignore that, but just as we see, silver got right up to a horizontal resistance line and failed. And gold managed to break out, obviously, but now it starts to seem to roll over. So I wouldn't be too comfortable hanging in this sector for a long period or this industry group for a long period if it's all going to start to roll over. While we're here, maybe I'll just mention the copper names because copper really got broken down, but it is at major long-term support. So if we were expecting copper to start to rally, this could be helpful. And if we look in on lithium that I just mentioned uh, briefly in the intro, this is the lithium chart. And again, it's pretty much following Tesla. Tesla started to break out around October, and that's when this chart finally broke its big downtrend. So as we see all of these charts coming together, related to electricity, I think that's probably one of the big themes for 2020 and beyond, is to try and look towards that sector. I think 4 of the cars in the Super Bowl ads, 4 out of 5, were for electric cars, and it was a GMC Hummer, it was the Ford Mustang SUV, the Porsche. So a lot of names trying to push their electric vehicles. Obviously, Audi, Mercedes, BMW are all coming out with them. So Tesla's going to find some competition here. But I think the big news for investors is if you wanted to be an ESG investor, an environmental and social governance investment theme, you're finding a lot of people are starting to look towards this electric car chase. And I think rather than chasing the high flying name like Tesla out in the sunshine there, you might be better off going to get something a little less volatile. And here is the 5-minute version. So what we're seeing here now down 750. So it's about the same since we started the show, but clearly seems like the peak has come off. And when we put Tesla into scale here, that's pretty much a parabolic move of epic proportion. And now the real question is, when you start to see this volume coming in like this, you would think you're near the end of the run. Again, a lot of these days are moving up 10, 15, 20%. You're getting pretty close. And I think anybody who held out for that final day, congratulations. I would be, parabolics don't usually correct sideways is the big learning here. So that would be one thing to think about. Let's just go back to the indexes. And as we wrap up here, I think the Russell, some of the small caps and that kind of thing can be helpful in just watching where they're at. And what we see is they aren't anywhere near their previous highs. And so what I want to watch for here is, does this end up stalling out, let's say below 1030 or something, and I'm on the $ SML. Again, the Microsofts of the world will continue to lead. I think the bigger picture is, what is the broad market doing? And we can also, when we look at the broad market, as you near the top, what you start to find is that a bunch of stocks start to underperform well before the major indexes do. And I'm pretty sure everybody knows that the top 5 or top 7 make up like 50% of the NASDAQ 100. So it's really the NASDAQ 10 we're talking about. And of that group, at this point in time, what we, when we're watching the price action and everything's just going ballistic to the moon, I think for personal, for your portfolio, if it's diversified into a bunch of different things, you're probably going to find that you start to underperform the index earlier if you don't have, I'll call it those 7 names or whatever, holding your portfolio up. I think I've mentioned it a couple of times, but I think the move up in Amazon is kind of the one I like the most, where they're building out their network, and eventually they're probably going to succeed with lowering the cost of that home delivery. So that's probably a bigger issue. Thanks for taking the time to join me on Market Buzz. Market Buzz airs Wednesdays and Fridays at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. You can also see the recordings on StockChartsTV YouTube page. And don't forget to check out Ralph Akampour's History of Wall Street over the last 50 years. It's a great show. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.